John, assuming that we believe in God or some supernatural intentionality, how do we solve the problem of evil, which is so extant in the world we know?
The beginning of a traditional solution would be to say that you can't have all goods simultaneously. For example, if you have the elegance of the physical world, you cannot have constant miracles breaking physical laws. Or if you have the advantages of freedom, you cannot have a God who constantly interferes to take your freedom away from you whenever you are going to do a foolish or wicked thing. That would be one way of starting to get into this problem.
And what are some solutions to that, to the problems of evil? How do you then continue? Because people say that God is omnipotent. God should be able to make it so that children don't get leukemia, or how does it benefit me if I have a cancer, or natural disasters of earthquakes?
Well, one thing you might be asking God to do is to set up basic laws of nature in such a way that nothing in the least bad ever happens. And it could simply be that this was not possible, just as it might be that no matter how you set up the arrangement of particles early in the Big Bang, you couldn't get a world in which every single coin which was ever tossed, of trillions of coins, they always landed heads. No matter how you arrange the particles, you wouldn't get that result coming out. That would be one possible solution. The other possible solution is, yes, God could create a world where the arrangement of the particles was such that all the coins always landed heads, but he'd also create a whole lot of other worlds as well, because that world was not the only world which was worth creating, and God would have reasons for creating all the worlds which were worth creating.
In that sequence, you have an infinite number of worlds in which ours is just one, and that in essence solves or attempts to solve the problem of evil, because it says of all these worlds, there's different gradations of evil in each one.
That would be one way of going, and I don't know to what extent you're asking me to be dogmatic on behalf of these religious people, saying that all sensible ones among them ought to think in a particular way. I mean, one of the problems which comes up is if God has one universe which is better than all the others, why doesn't he just repeat it? And some would here say, well, there's the good of variety. But I myself would prefer the pantheistic view that the various universes were all structures in the divine mind, and you couldn't have pure repetition, because this would be like the case of having a table which was 6 foot long and also 6 foot long and also 6 foot long and also 6 foot long. That this is impossible in the case of structures which were part of one and the same divine mind. That would be one way of going.
So then, as we have variation, which is now critical, we have variations in the degree or amount or nature of evil.
Some worlds will be better than others, and our world might very well be very far from the top.
Now, some would say that this whole messy conversation that we're having just shows that the whole system of gods and religion are all worthless, because we're creating worlds on top of worlds and complications of philosophy that just degenerate into nonsense.
That's a view. I have a lot of sympathy towards it. I just don't happen myself to hold it. I can see why sensible people would think this sort of thing.
And why do you feel strongly then that that's not the case?
Well, look at it this way. A lot of people, as soon as they are discussing the future of the human race, say how dreadful it would be to allow the human race to die out. That here's a glorious adventure which is going on, which should be kept continuing. a lot of these people will be philosophers with groups of happy students listening to every word. And these same philosophers will do this in courses in ethics, but when they start teaching philosophy of religion, they say, oh, what a dreadful place this world is. What a mistake God made in creating it. And you begin to think, isn't there some sort of inconsistency here? Shouldn't they make up their minds one way or the other? Is this world worth having among all the worlds which are worth having? Or is it actually of negative value, in which case it would be a good thing to press an annihilation button and get rid of it?
Well, some would say that even a negative world, a world that was net negative, which some might argue that ours is still worth having more than nothing, because the existence of consciousness and being is so singularly important.
Well, I think some people would say that even something which was very, very low down on the scale of values would still be better than nothing. There is a theory among the philosophers known as the privation theory of evil, according to which evil is just a privation of a greater good. For example, you have the evil of blindness. That just means that your life is not as good as it would be if you had the good of sight, but it doesn't mean to say your life has got negative value. I had a very good friend who had a very successful life despite blindness. He ended up as an Oxford professor of law. They had the Braille Library, and he was able to teach from this. He had a successful life despite being blind.
So that his life is certainly a worthwhile life, even though it had this piece of what we're calling evil, but it's probably a better word for it.
Yes, but this privation theory of evil could be pressed to extremes. In fact, if you took it seriously, it would have to be pressed to extremes. You would say that even being tortured to death would be better than just being killed off quickly. And a lot of people would think that was just wrong, that some states of mind actually have negative intrinsic value in the sense that they are worse than a blank, worse than unconsciousness.
If that were the only thing that existed.
In themselves, they would be worse, and then you have the problem of why you can fit them into the general system. And a traditional answer of the theologians here is that if they didn't fit in, there wouldn't be a system, that you would just get a rubbishy world, which would be like a jigsaw puzzle with a whole lot of pieces actually missing from it.
Because it would be purely mechanistic without evil?
Because the absence of all the evils would make the mechanism not there. It would be as if you took a mechanistic world and cut out all the bad parts from it.
And you would have something that just wouldn't work.
Well, provided you left all the other parts, the people in the other parts might think it was all working because they wouldn't realize that parts of it was missing. I mean, suppose I know about something over there because the light rays are coming towards me. God cuts out the place which the light rays are coming from because it's got the state of somebody suffering. He doesn't have to cut out the light rays coming from it. So I might think it's still there.
Oh, okay. But it wasn't there in reality.
It wasn't there in reality.
Now, in any of these systems in which evil must be recognized because it is a fact of our known world in so many different variations, do people feel in any of these systems that God actually created the evil, that affirmatively put evil into the system because that's the best way to make it work?
I think that many people would feel that God deliberately created the system, that the system wouldn't be a system without evil, but they'd at the same time say that this was a regrettable fact, which even God would have to regret but put up with. And it would be like the fact that 2 and 2 makes 4, that in certain cases this could lead to regrettable results. But even God couldn't change the fact that 2 and 2 make 4.
And that in order for God to change it, to make 2 and 2 make 5, which in some circumstance could eliminate the evil, would just be impossible.
Yes, suppose that the only way you can stop a hydrogen bomb going off, it's been put there by terrorists, is to generate the number 5 on a particular screen, and the only way you can get anything up on the screen is to press buttons which are number 2. No matter how you press these buttons, you won't be able to get 5 on the screen because 2 and 2 make 4 and they don't make 5. Sorry.
But when theologians come up with this complex system that says that evil is a result of, but God is not creating, it seems to me that is really some very simplistic rationalization. That in fact you should, if this be your system, go all the way and say that yes, God created the evil, and don't try to beautify God.
Yep. God created the evil reluctantly as part of the system, not able to get the good of the system without having the evil in it. Now, this would depend on whether or not you thought that God was in control of absolutely everything going on. If you thought that God allowed beings to make up their own minds, that God wouldn't know how they would make up their minds unless he actually saw them making them up and so on, then you could say God created the opportunities for evil, but God didn't create the evil of people's minds being made up in evil ways. And there you might have to distinguish between the evil of the natural world, a volcano going up and destroying a village, say, and the evil of a murderer deciding to kill a particular child.
And these would be 2 separate categories of evil, a moral evil and a natural evil.
The natural evil, God couldn't avoid the evil of the volcano going up without bringing miracles into the situation. And if you start bringing in miracles, when's this ever going to end? But on the other hand, in the case of the evil decision to kill the child, all that God did was to set up a situation in which the murderer could decide to kill the child, but didn't dictate the killing of the child. This would be a way that traditional religious people would, on one view, try to wriggle out of the problem, but on the other view, would be able adequately to solve the problem. The main thing is that a lot of religious people stress that they don't want to be confident in this area. They don't think that they have the final solution. They think there's a major problem here. They think they can see how the problem might be solved.